What's the weirdest rule you had in your home growing up? Story 1. At my friend's house, they had a no pizza balling rule. There were 3 teenage brothers, and when they ordered pizzas, at least a couple larges, tempers flared quickly when people would try to grab as many slices as they could. The first rule in place was that you couldn't have more than 1 slice at a time, and you could grab another once you had the last bite in your mouth. But one of the brothers quickly figured out that if you ball up a slice, he could fit it in his mouth and grab another one, hence, no pizza balling. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. I wasn't allowed to make noise. If I spoke above a mumble, I was being surly. If I was playing, it could not be audible outside of my shut bedroom door. If I was cleaning, which I usually was, then I couldn't make noise while doing it. The consequences varied, usually being screamed at, having something thrown just past my head, or having something I valued taken away. My brother did not have the same restrictions. He's always been an avid musician, played video games at full volume, cracked jokes, and was generally encouraged to speak up. The only time he had the same rules was when our mother was on the phone, which was pretty often. I don't resent him for being treated better, and he frequently advocated for me. Now I have some interesting quirks. I can wash dishes in complete silence. I still leave drawers and cabinet doors slightly ajar. I sneak up on people at work by accident. If people are watching TV with me, I have to remember to turn the volume up for them. There are days when I can't handle the sound of turning on the shower or running the vacuum cleaner. I have a decimeter app on my phone and frequently check to see how much noise I'm making. I even sneeze silently, but I blast the radio in my car and through my headphones. Yes, I'm in therapy. Edit. I'm glad some of you found the humor in my story. It's okay to laugh at the absurdity of it. A few things to add based on those responses. You can't vacuum silently, but you can get on your hands and knees with a large scrub brush and brush the debris out of the carpet. Yes, I have been to the Raised by Narcissist sub. It is helpful at times, but I am pretty far along in the healing process now. People there are still coming to terms with things that I dealt with 10 years ago. Yes, I'm a woman. That was a factor for sure. I was also unwanted. My mother had already decided to divorce my father when she got pregnant with me. She has implied that she wasn't a willing participant in that process, which I believe. Also, my brother didn't have it easy. His experiences were just different, but not necessarily better. My father was terrible, but mostly absent. He died badly a few years ago, and I didn't go to the funeral. I don't speak to my mother unless absolutely necessary. Abuse doesn't end when you turn 18. It turned into financial abuse, and she was also abusive to my child until I cut contact. My mother had a horrific childhood, and by all accounts our experience was an improvement on that, and I do think that she did the best she could with the information she had. I don't wish her any harm. I had a stepdad for a while. He was clueless, somewhat of an ass, and also being abused by her. He still taught me how to function and created some stability, though. There were other adults who tried to help with varying levels of success. CPS was involved at one point, but she outsmarted them. Those limited interactions with adults who clearly cared, had healthy boundaries, and treated me properly for my age made all the difference. So if you're witnessing something similar and can't act directly to correct the situation, do that. You are actually helping. Story 3. Not allowed to whistle at night. Was told that you'd hear one back from someone who isn't there. Clarification, my mother is Native American, so we have a few superstitions like that. House isn't haunted, parents aren't schizo, it's just mild superstition. Story 4. Parents had a plaque of the Alcatraz prison regulations above the pantry. You are entitled to food, clothing, shelter, and medical attention. Anything else that you get is a privilege. Okay, love you too, Mom. Edit. So this wasn't used as a joke. They stood by these rules and actually ignored the medical attention most of the time. So I almost died multiple times in my life for not receiving medical care. It's kind of crappy, those of you commenting about how you want a plaque like that for your own kids. I really hope you guys are joking and don't intend on actually acting like this as a parent. Story 5. Wasn't me, but my neighbor. When my dad would come home from work, my friend would have to go home. His parents told him that because that meant it was dinner time and therefore he should come home. Him, being a child, didn't grasp that portion of the rule. He only understood come home when my dad gets home. This translated into my friend being terrified of my father. If he saw my dad turning into the driveway, he would drop whatever we were doing and just sprint home. If my dad would make it home and get out of the car, he would cry and run home. Somehow, in his mind, my father was bad. It took some time before my friend was comfortable around my father. Story 6. that if someone knocked on the door, we were not allowed to move or speak until Mom decided that yes, we were home and would accept company. Didn't realize how weird that was until my friend came over and seemed surprised when someone knocked on the door. I covered her mouth and pulled her away from the curtains. My mom refuses to answer the door for unannounced visitors and to this day will still pretend that no one is home if she doesn't feel like socializing. It's even worse when they call her cell phone and hear it ringing from inside the home, despite every television being on mute and every light in the house being turned off. Story 7. When I turned 16, I was not allowed to leave my room for any reason whatsoever between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m. I had my own bathroom and was given a mini fridge for snacks if I got hungry or was up late in the summer. I found out later that this was because my mom would get on dating sites and invite random men to the house for coitus and didn't want me stealing the spotlight and taking away her shot at love. Edit to some other questions. I don't think she was doing this for money, because we were always broke as crap. If she did get compensation, it was probably very small amounts or non-monetary. I didn't mind too much because we fought a lot and I tended to keep my distance from her anyway. It was just weird that she'd specifically lock me in during that time. She was in therapy and she was on meds. The problem was that they would stop working or she'd start abusing them after so long and then it would create another spiral or crazy crap. This was actually one of the more tame behaviors from her. Unfortunately, she never really got better, just worse. This all came to a head a few years ago when she basically ran away from home. We got a call about 2 months later that they found her laying prone on the ground with no response, with some injuries that were consistent to a small gang in the city she was living in at the time. Best we can tell, she got into some kind of trouble with them and they killed her or had her killed. I didn't have a great relationship with my mom, but yes, I still loved her. Story 8. I couldn't recline or lay my body down at all if my boyfriend was over. My mom thought that me laying down would give them thoughts, so I couldn't do it. Once, I put my feet up on the couch while my fiancé was over, and my mom got upset and thought I was trying to turn him on. I also changed into sweatpants from jeans once because I was going to watch a movie with my boyfriend, and she thought I changed to give him better access. I was just uncomfortable in jeans. Oh, also, no Sailor Moon, Avatar, Fairly OddParents, Harry Potter, or anything with magic or witchcraft. Also never celebrated Halloween and never trick-or-treated. Story 9. My father woke up at anywhere between 10 and 12 every day. Immediately upon waking, he would stumble to the bathroom where he would spend 45 to 75 minutes coughing mucus out of his lungs and spitting it into the sink. He had advanced emphysema because of his decades-long smoking habit. During this time, no one was to talk to him, look at him, or interact with him in any way, beyond bringing him crappy instant coffee. I learned this lesson the hard way the first week after my mother married him, because I had to pee, so I opened the door and was immediately confronted with a 38-year-old, 400-pound man in nothing but his underwear, red-faced and screaming at me to get the F out of the bathroom. Story 10. Geez and gosh were banned because they sounded kinda like Jesus and God, so it was considered subtly taking the Lord's name in vain. Wasn't allowed to say shut up because that was a bad word as well, and then one day my mom told me to shut up. We weren't allowed to celebrate Halloween because it was the devil's holiday. We weren't even allowed to go to school that day in order to avoid the festivities. They told us the Halloween candy was cursed, so we wouldn't eat it. In the night, we turned off the lights and hid in terror. It was unsafe to go outside in case a Satanist kidnapped us to sacrifice us to the devil. Oh, also, Pokemon was considered demonic. Felt bad for watching it, but I couldn't resist. Story 11. I wasn't allowed to go near the kitchen. In my country, it's common for middle-class families to have maids doing house chores, and my parents said I shouldn't bother the maids doing the job. They also said the kitchen is full of dangerous things. So I grew up not knowing how to cook anything. Every time I go near the kitchen, my mother would kind of mean laugh at me, saying I couldn't cook so I shouldn't bother messing with the kitchen. She couldn't cook herself, having maids her whole life, so that might be insecurity, projection, or something, I don't know. Or maybe she thought if she can't cook and her daughter can, it'll expose her as a bad mother or something. The woman had a lot of that kind of insecurity. There's a lot to unpack there. Once I moved out, one of the first things I did was start teaching myself how to cook, and I love cooking now. Story 12. My parents are awesome, but I have some weird cousins. When I was younger, my parents went on a short anniversary trip, leaving me and my siblings and my older cousin to watch us. She's the same age as my parents. I remember one morning turning on Magic School Bus, and then she frantically grabs the remote from me and turns it off. She then proceeds to go on a lecture on how witchcraft is a sin and made by Satan himself, and that Magic School Bus is one of those awful, sinful abominations. I just couldn't believe it. Turns out her kid wasn't allowed to watch anything like that. Harry Potter, Magic School Bus, Wizards of Waverly Place. Some of the many things that apparently are just a gateway to joining a satanic cult. Her sister held the same beliefs. Story 13. My dad had diverticulosis, pockets in the intestine, and couldn't eat sesame seeds, among other things. When we would eat fast food sandwiches, everyone had to give their bottom buns to Dad in exchange for his top buns. So all my life, I grew up eating burgers with 2 top, seeded buns. This was never explained, and it was from before I was born, so it literally was when I was in college that I realized it wasn't normal. I thought it was just dad privilege to have 2 bottom buns or something. Story 14. My mom's crappy boyfriend moved us into his mobile home, and suddenly I wasn't allowed to have a bed. It might break through the floor, or a swing set, or any of my toys. I was not allowed to watch TV if the boyfriend was home. I wound up begging my mom to buy me some horse magazine and coloring books and made my own paper doll style toys. Ponies and Lion King for days. The boyfriend also offered to buy me a horse if I behaved. So of course I was a model child, but mysteriously that horse never appeared. I was so much better off when they broke up and Mom found a 2-bedroom apartment. I got a real bed and a kitten. Mom told me recently that he died and was shocked when I gave 0 craps and made a callous statement about it. Story 15. Parents divorced. Dad's house. We were told to shower when we visited and put our mom's house clothing in a box under the bed after it was cleaned because Mom's house was infected. It was called the Mom's House box. Later found out my stepmom was paranoid because my dad cheated on my mom, and she thought that my mom would take revenge somehow. Oh, but it got crazier than that. My stepmom made us write in journals, told us to write whatever we wanted. So we did. After 3 years, she read it out loud at the dinner table and then punished us for what we wrote. Later, she locked me in my room, called the cops, said I was trying to murder her, got told to be appreciative of my rich family by a cop. Once I went to school, I told them what had happened, and stepmom got told she wasn't allowed to be on the school property anymore. Dad and her had to move to a different area. Story 16. We couldn't eat ice cream 2 days in a row. My dad's reasoning for it makes sense. There may be a risk of heart disease in the family, so limiting ice cream means limiting intake of saturated fat. However, the execution of the rule is questionable. Why 2 days? Why be so rigid and inflexible? Does having this rule mean the kids look forward to their ice cream days, overall increasing intake? I'm the youngest and we're all adults now. The rule came up in a discussion and my brother came up with a hypothetical, what if I eat it 2 days in a row, but then I don't eat it again for the next 3 days? And then my dad admitted that it would be a reasonable exception, but he wouldn't have allowed it back then. I still follow the rule. It's not like I eat ice cream every other day like clockwork, it's a rare treat. I just still avoid 2 days in a row. But I sometimes make my brother's exception. Another anecdote, my sophomore year of college, a frozen yogurt station was installed in the dining hall. I texted my dad to ask if the rule applies to frozen yogurt. It does. Story 17. Every last Friday of the month, my mom would make us stay home from school and play video games as a family. Didn't matter what was happening at school, test, or whatnot, it was a rule and a tradition. She'd watch us play Sega or Nintendo games and make us these extravagant lunches. As a kid, I always thought it was awesome and I look back on those days fondly. Unfortunately, it was for a darker reason. My dad was overly strict and pretty abusive. Although I loved the man unconditionally, he was also abusive to my mom and very controlling. Thing was, he had a good job and was off on the weekends, and us kids obviously were at school all week. My mom made the rules so that she could spend a day with us, having fun and being together without my dad there instigating a massive fight, or beating us kids because there were vacuum lines on the carpet. It was the only real time my mom got to spend alone without my dad there, aside from summer vacations. I didn't realize it at the time, but to this day, I don't think we've missed a single last Friday. She never would have allowed it. Story 18. We all had to meticulously record in a ledger every penny we spent on our family cars. Gas, oil changes, which we did ourselves, alignments, etc. Each ledger was kept in the glove box. Each entry had to include the date, the mileage, price per gallon, gas, or per quart, oil, or some other description of what was being purchased, total cost, and a few other things I'm sure I've forgotten. This was super embarrassing if I had to get gas with high school or college friends in my car. I was always teased about it. However, I always assumed my dad had some impressive spreadsheet with which he was tracking something. Years later, after I bought my own car, I asked my dad what he did with all that data. He said, "Not much, really. Occasionally, I'd look to see what kind of gas mileage the cars were getting." Story 19. No TV. This was the 80s. We finally got a terrible, tiny, black and white TV when I was maybe 12. The only thing I could watch without ruthless mocking was the original Star Trek if there happened to be reruns. I can recite them by heart to this day. I was so pop culture illiterate, it was unreal. I had no idea what Saturday Night Live was or MTV or anything. In retrospect, I think my dad just hated everything and especially loud noises. I did learn to love reading though. Oh, and also dinner was between 10 p.m. to midnight. I was a night owl also from babyhood, so this wasn't the worst thing for me, but I do remember being woken up to come eat many times. My father just preferred it that way, so that was how it was. Story 20. When I lived with my mom, my stepfather was the man of the house, meaning he made up every rule and even made on-the-spot rules to counter my ADHD and Asperger's. Dinner rules were a pain in my butt. There was one rule where I could only get up with my plate if I was standing first. Another horrendous rule was I couldn't mix culture food groups, even though every other night he would mix Cholula with ramen. Lifestyle rules, like I couldn't play video games after 8 p.m. This is where all my free time was, and it was ruined since I still despised commercial broadcasting. Another rule that was in place by my grandma, a very power-hungry witch with the sole intention of disproving my Asperger's, was that I could only play 1 hour of video games after she went through my phone and found a text of my friend calling me an ass a whole day after a conversation about my grandma. It still saddens me that my mom stuck with him for as long as she did. In the last 6 months of me living with my mom, he turned into an alcoholic, constantly drinking whiskey, liquor, and beer into one. My mother's divorce with him turned her into an alcoholic too. She thought that it was her fault that he cheated on her. Story 21. I'm late to this, but I'm the only girl in my entire generation. I have no girl cousins and 3 brothers. I wasn't allowed to do anything with my dad and brothers. I wasn't allowed on vacation. I wasn't allowed to go to the store. My mom was welcome on vacation, but I wasn't. During the summer months, I was sent to live with relatives and my family would travel without me. My dad would constantly remind me about how he never wanted a girl. I remember when I was 9 to 10, I wanted more than anything to be a boy, to be accepted. I'm good now. I have issues, but I know it and it's okay. I also love being female, and I know that this isn't an acceptable way to be treated. I don't talk to any of my family except my mom, and I have a great life. I would say my biggest issue is seeing a dad be a good and real dad to his little girl. I tear up instantly. I'm so thankful to that man for just being a good dad. Girls need love from their dads. Story 22. We were forced to wear socks during the winter. My feet were always too hot and sweaty, and my parents refuted that because their feet always got cold. If we didn't wear socks, we had to stand outside in the freezing cold without socks on. One year, I managed to have both minor frostbite and athlete's foot at the same time. My parents were abusive pieces of crap, and I hate them. Hatred can be a positive emotion if it gives you the realization to rise up from your situation and become the exact opposite of those who created you. Story 23. Forbidden to make any noise whatsoever or show any emotion. If we ask to listen to a different radio station in the car, threat of violence. If we ask to roll down a window while 2 adults chain smoked in the car, threat of violence. If we voiced an opinion about what to watch on the family's one TV set, threat of violence. Opinion on what's for supper, threat of violence. I learned to never speak or give any opinions, ever. The only way to avoid being screamed at and struck was to behave as if I didn't exist. Adult life has been rather unsuccessful as a result. Sorry, I guess I just needed to get that off my chest. It wasn't all bad. There were 2 exceptions to the above: Christmas and birthdays. The parents must have known they couldn't totally oppress children on those days. What my parents got for making it clear they didn't want a son was to lose the son. I was about 22 when I realized I didn't have to spend any time with them. It's been a long time since they've heard from me. I found out my mom died by doing a routine Google search and finding her obituary. My reaction was, wait for it, nothing, just as I was taught. Story 24. A few. Was not allowed to eat between meals. My sister and I were not allowed to take naps. Parents could, though. Also, no breakfast foods for lunch or dinner unless it was a night my mom made pancakes for dinner, which I couldn't eat. I was made to and then would not be able to leave the bathroom the whole night. Trust me, when I got to college, I loved eating cereal at 10 p.m. I used to sneak in the pantry and eat in the dark, but you can't sneak a bowl of cereal. My kids will definitely not have these rules. Story 25. Oh boy, I have a pretty long list of ridiculous rules I grew up with. My dad mainly enforced them. He was Christian, so my sister and I were brought up this way. I think my mom just went along with it. Some rules in our household. Not allowed to watch The Simpsons, mainly because Homer was depicted as a stupid male/father figure and he had an issue with that. And also the same reason for that show, The Adventures of Alex Mack. We were banned from watching that for a short period. Grew up instilled with the idea, do not argue or question authority. Your parents are always right. Oh, what a lie that is. Not allowed to shave/wax my legs until I was 13. My dad would have preferred 16, but my mom helped me convince him otherwise. I had very hairy legs. Not allowed to wear any fragrant aerosol sprays like Impulse until my mom convinced him I could get it for a Christmas present at age 13-14. Not allowed to read magazines like Dolly and Girlfriend, Australian magazine for young girls. I remember begging him to let me buy one, and I still couldn't convince him. My mom eventually stepped in and bought me and my sister one, and we were so excited. I don't like those kinds of magazines now. Not allowed to say fart, shut up, heck, hell, oh my god / lord, oh my gosh, because apparently it was essentially the same thing, but, crap, or anything else considered crude. I remember my sister overheard the C word on a TV show, both of us not having any clue what it meant. I was about 12. She just asked very loudly, "Dad, what's a..." And just from his facial expression and body language, I thought, wow, he sure doesn't like this word. Now, I love this word. I remember being fearful of saying the word sex. My sister and I thought it was a bad word. I vividly remember writing it on the steamed-up shower window and then frantically washing it away, thinking, what if it reappears when he has the shower? Initially, I wasn't allowed to go and see Titanic with my friends when it first screened. They were going as a group, and I pleaded with him, saying, I promise if you let me see it, I won't ever swear in my whole life. I think I thought that the explicit language was the reason he didn't want me to go see it. Might have been another reason, but I ended up going and I broke my promise, sucker. South Park and Ren and Stimpy were strictly out of bounds. I sneakily watched these at my uncle's house. At age 16, I had my first boyfriend and I wasn't allowed to stay over the night or go to parties. This went on for a few years, until I was 18. I ended up just sneaking out and lying. Resented my parents for this. Funny thing is, in the past few years, I found out that my dad had numerous affairs with other women and regularly smoked weed during my childhood. Adulthood is a myth. Thankfully, I'm a well-balanced human adult who now knows what not to do when I have a family of my own.